interest on practicing about I'm not sure if it is of Right, so to speak, we're going to talk about today's lesson, and this is a bit something different from we would normally expected. This is probably only of hearsay, saying that these were the new, most up-to-date C Cambridge IELTS 21. I'm not sure if it is of higher capabilities or not, but I think that you could maybe find it useful in some way. Okay, so then I'm just gonna try to put it on here. So then you can have a look about the Davis sisters, which is the first paragraph. And then so they started to talk about Gwendolyn and Margaret Davis, who were the two very pronounced and advanced British lady at the time. They wouldn't really go into any formal education, but then they did try to have really high qualities of education, especially in terms of artwork, masterpiece, artist at the time. And then they started to collect with the money they inherited from their grandfather, who was an industrial mogul who collect a huge amount of fortune by doing business with trading, I think, trading, and also about selling, I think it was from metals, a certain type of precious metal. And then so they had accumulated a large amount of money at the time. Okay, and then after that, we are seeing these were their question types. So the first set of questions was referring to only one word for the nodes, and it largely focused on their previous life. As we could have seen, like they have different life course compared to many of us, the usual. And then they will, and they did actually at the time, they did embark on a journey that many of the women at the time won't be able to have. They couldn't have the chance. They were not allowed to have such a fortune to buy and to start it their early collection of artwork from those French artists. When we talk about the early life of the two ladies, they were actually two sisters. They were the most. No changing here, Renee, no changing. You need to be very aware again. Try to remind everyone we are not. Be very careful about what you would like to share on the camera. As I would like to propose for a change, you could put a sticky note on your camera so that you don't expose something that maybe is something rather private. Okay, so let's get back to the work. Right, be very careful just to have a kind remind again, like your mom, right? The usual way. So this is the latest version. So if you are having any interest on practicing about Gwendolyn and Margaret Davis, or perhaps you've already done this type of questions or this exact question before, or you would like to give it a try. If you have done this before, then you could just let go. And then if you would like to give it a new try, then just let me know. All right, good. So because these type of questions will start with notes, so I suppose it should not be a stranger for most of us, because when the past, say, 12 weeks, we've practiced a lot, and then we already knew exactly how those questions has been set. All right, so it should not be difficult. Just to have a short and quick remind for about 2 minutes. Right. When you do the notes, in any way, any type of questions, just make sure first it is notes. And then so you knew exactly a note, or when we try to do note filling, it's from a top-down system. It's sequential. Okay, so note completion. And then remember, it was only one word allowed in this particular range. So when we talk about the word limit, you should be very careful. Don't miss any, let's say, don't make the word limit your absolute kill. Okay, so if it is going to be your absolute kill, it's going to be, oh, I just forgot at the time, and then it was something irreplaceable. Okay, so whenever single time you see a note, look at the topic here. Gwendolyn and Margaret Davis, which is the topic for this article. So when we first see this, they have different segmentations, remember? The first segmentations from question 1 to question number 3, it was all about their family and early life under the same category. Okay, and then the second subtitle is the sisters as art collectors. So when we see the two sisters as art collectors, which means it's about the time where we are going to read the pre-adult, like they probably are the pre-adult. Let me just do a kind regard again. I do realize that sometimes teachers are very encouraged to see students turn on their camera and have a live discussion. But be very careful when sometimes we might accidentally click on the button of the camera, and then so we might be able to share something that we were not intentionally want to share in the first place. So be very careful. Okay, so the second topic over here. So when we do this, look at the topic. The first topic is family and early life. So number 1 to number 3, right? The second topic is the sisters as art collectors. So which is their, when they get to the age of a young adults, they started to inherit the money from their grandfather. They went with the company of their governess. They walked, literally, they walked to every gallery in the UK, and then they started to appreciate art and artists from France. After that, what is it? We're going to see that was the impact of First World War. So that was about the time, if you have seen that from Belgium and Wales, that is the locating word, right? So we can mark that as locating word. Literally starting from here, find the names of Belgium to Wales. Okay, and then you are going to see where they could read a little bit lower for question 6, the answer. And then the last title over here was getting on to opinions about the sisters as art collectors, because they got enough money. So they started to buy at the time with the help of the really true art appraisers, with the help of those professional art appraisers. They had a huge collection, up to 260. And they had collections from Monet, from, if I could still remember, Vincent van Gogh, and many other famous French artists. And eventually, when they never got married, so when they passed away, they have assigned all of these artwork collectors, artwork they collected over the years, up to 260 masterpieces from all over France and Europe, went to the National Gallery of Wales. And that's a great fortune, I have to say, if it is in any way from any galleries or any collector's dream, is that all of these things they collected throughout their life went to the National Gallery. But that certainly is a great contribution to not just the fame of the gallery, the National Gallery, and also it was like, because the normal galleries won't be able to do so. And then all of their life, on be up to 60 years. And then they had a huge collection of that. So Gwendolyn and Margaret Davis was the first passage that start from Cambridge 21. Okay, we only got an excerpt from the publisher. But they were not allowed to share at some point from the publisher, saying teachers were not allowed to share their books because that will decrease their chance of selling their real publications. So you could have a quick look about this. Okay. Right. So we are not allowed to share probably the entire article, but we might be able to take some screenshot if in any way you would like to have a look of it. No trouble at all. And I can assure you we didn't see anything. We were just seeing like the upper, shoulder, neckline, that sort of stuff. Okay, I'm just going to put these screenshots if you like to practice about the latest. But these were only the excerpt, and teachers are not allowed to share any books or files here, but we are sharing some, say, excerpts, screenshot. So I suppose it should be, something fly under the radar, but maybe not so good to do it like every single time, but then we'll just give it a try. And make sure that you could have these files, keep it within our digital wall. Or else I might get into trouble by saying, okay, I'm not having this copyright, and I might get some phone calls. I might get some phone calls from my secretary. Okay, so when you read this, go for the subtitle, and every subtitle accounted to, let's say, maybe 1 up to 3 different questions, but they all with locating words. Start with them and get some practice about it. Right, we'll start from today. These will refer to the reading passage. 好，还是要跟大家分享一下哦。好啦，今天不是今天不是只有一位同学，今天有2、3位同学不小心，可能在某个时间点，比较不，应该说比较没有预期到的场合，然后不小心按到 cam。所以不是只有一位同学哦，是可能我们讲老实一点，应该有3、4个啦，就是可能刚开始的时候没有注意到，但没有关系哦，因为我们真的什么都没有看到，它就是一闪而逝而已。Okay, and then we're not getting this of our new topic. 好了，我们没有要来这个拿这件事情来这个我们要那个大做文章，没有哦，这个事情很常见，只是说可能在有一些小撇步，比如说弄一个贴纸或者是胶带之类的，就是比较不会在没有防备的心理下面，我觉得可能会可以把它稍微贴一下，这样子的话就会更安全一些。因为有时候我们也很难知道 hacker 到底会不会半夜把我们的电脑打开，然后偷看我们家里面。我觉得这是一个比较安全的方式哦，就算是家里的 CCTV 也有可能。Right, so we'll start from the reading. True, false, not given. Right, same thing for this part because these type of questions, as you can see, are extremely popular. How do I know these were extremely popular? Because when we get back to David's sisters, the second set of questions were true, false, not given. 为什么我们要说是非题是最受欢迎的一题？因为大家看一下。我们在 C21 所释出的这个片段当中，我们就看到了它在第2题组8到13题的时候，它就是出是非题。所以是非题是一个非常高频出题的这个题型，一定要多练习。还有对于什么时候我们是 false， 什么时候是 not given， 要很清楚。We have to have a very clear vision about exactly what was that question for. Okay, so we'll go for this.Although these were something rudimentary, but we will try to go and have a smooth sail without any pause. We have to go straight away. So in case that we can finish 23 to 42 of the page. The first part is that useful strategy identifying keywords and phrases. Like I said, what we were doing previously was to say, okay, we are trying to identify the locating words. So which are the locating words? We previously talked about the locating words were up to 12 different kinds, remember? And then if you can name the first one. The first one we can remember if we would try to talk about some of those keywords or phrases that we can think about. The first one we get over is like, if we go for titles, remember? So we got titles, subtitles. Let's just go through it, a quick review. The first, the top 12. First, titles. Number 2, subtitles. Yeah, I know that was nonsense, like titles and subtitles are together. So number 3, numbers and figures. Numbers and figures, for example, if they talk about 4,780, or if they talk about 19%, 8%, 2.5%, that would also account as for figures. Okay. And what is the most important for? For was like dates and years. So when they talk about back to the year of 1920 and the 21st of May, that sort of thing. Okay. So dates and years. What else? Question 5. Question 5 were like capitalized or italicized words. Italicized words. For example, if we were to mention about 5, we're like, those words are all in capital. For example, the UN or UNESCO, right? Those were capitalized words. Italicized words were words that looks like this. These were italicized words. Slightly tilted than the upright print. We call them italicized. And the reason why it would be in italicized words because it was the stress, it was the focus. So we usually will look for those things as locating words. Oh, sorry. I was just trying to erase the arrow and obviously they won't let me. Okay, so moving on to number 6. What is the most top 12? And then we go for technical and unusual words. Right. And then number 7 is like words around the blank space. Or words around the blank spaces, something like that. Okay. So I'm just going to put it down like this. Or I'll make it quick. We'll just make it 8 to the list. Okay. So for example, we also have names and locations. So these were the most prominent locating words that we could see. Now, if we try to move on to the following parts, sometimes they all also involve number 9 for ADJ. Okay, but that was the extra. Now, moving on to the first part. Look at the statement below. These were no encountering tests, but the statement includes useful information, even if the studies on their own. Underline keywords and phrases. So these might be regarding as locating words, or you could just name them as keywords, which is just fine. Those are locating words. And then we talk about the top 12, but we only have the top 9 so far. And we will add up to the list in the following weeks. Now, if we were to say about number 1 to number 6, all of these were with specific locating words that are very prominent. For example, if we were to look at the first, they would say about Canadian scientists in 2011. So in that case, we are thinking about Canadian scientists. These were names and locations, like if they were locations, Canadian nationalities, right? And then the year and dates. So 2011 was accounted for the years. Now, made a surprising discovery. So surprising discovery is like they are talking about an adjective referring to things that they weren't expected to have, or they weren't expected to see at the first place. Okay, so something surprising. Now, if we're moving on to question 2 in the following parts, question 2 over here, it says, a newspaper report in the Sydney Daily Times. So what was it? Sydney Daily Times is a title of a newspaper. So we can assume that this is one of the very important locating words again, right? So now if we were to think about those words, Sydney Daily Times, counted for titles, number 1, right? Contain factual errors. Factual errors were like maybe they were wrong, maybe they were inaccurate. So that's why they say having some factual errors. They were not always true. Okay, but how can a newspaper included something unreal? We'll see how it goes later. Okay, so factual errors is also one of those things we could keep in mind. Factual errors, they were italicized, right? Now, if we're moving on to question 3, what can you identify as important locating words? Some academics more like professors, scientists, or scholars' name, have criticized the theory put forward by Dr. Jonathan Pardee. So if we were to put something important right down this range, let's see if we were seeing question 3, criticize the theory, which means they weren't happy. These might be referred to someone's attitude, right? Put forward by Dr. Jonathan Pardee. So again, that was referring to people's names. All right, and then when they say criticize, probably again, an italicized words. They criticize it. They were not happy about it. They might find it rather doubtful or not trustworthy. So you say they criticized the theory. They found it disbelieving, unconvincing. Okay, now if we're moving on to question 4, whales off the coast of South Africa. Now, because that was referring to the marine life, let's make it in the color of blue. South Africa. And that was referred to locations again, right? So locations, the same way as whales in New Zealand waters. So in New Zealand waters, again, that was referring to location, right? So when we spotted something important, that's the word that we will keep our eye on. What about question 5? If we're moving on to the explanation about 5, the Rolls-Royce Merlin engine, I just saw one the other day near my neighborhood, and it certainly was very grand and expensive, of course. They say the automobile manufacturer could help you to make your Rolls-Royce Merlin bulletproof, which means when someone, for example, criminals or terrorists would try to shoot to the car, and that type, the Rolls-Royce Merlin, can be made bulletproof. Even though they shot the car with their weapons, but the car will be bulletproof, which means without any harm. And that certainly is very grand, the level. Okay, so Rolls-Royce Merlin engines was modified. So, okay, if it is a car, do we have gray in color? We certainly don't have gray, but we have black. The Rolls-Royce Merlin engine is a name of an automobile model. So Rolls-Royce Merlin engine, referring to maybe a title. Okay. Or we could say it's something like technical or unusual words. Okay, we could see that engine was one of those cars, automobile, modified and improved in its first years in production. So modify and improve, which is very much like an adjective for number 9. Make it better, upscale, right? Now, when we go for number 6 and the following parts, the British public held a wide variety of opinions. Now, when you say someone held a wide variety of opinions, it means they were multifarious opinion people might have for one single subject. People will have source of or abundance of information or ideas about this. So they say a wide variety of opinions to this topic. So let's just put it this way. We might be saying that, okay, let's just say British public referring to the country, right? So we can always say locations to this part, locations, held a wide variety of opinions, which means they might be all very controversial. People might all hold up to their different ideas. According to the survey completed by over 3,000, so over 3,000, that was to talk about number 8, numbers up here, numbers, 3,000. So all of these, you can categorize something with features. 3,000 also accounted for numbers and figures. Okay, so that's the general way while I'm trying to explain this way. Now, if we're moving downward to part 2, so far they say which of the following might be used as locating words, as we have already listed 9 of them. So there are 1, 2, 10 of them. So let's just put a check next to the words that are appropriate. So we'll say the first, geographical location, certainly is, because locations means like number 8, names and locations. So we'll put a check onto it. Next, name of an academic, for example, Dr. Jonathan Pardee. Again, that appear for number 8 down there. So we're going to put a check. Next, an adverb or an adjective. We don't often see adjectives as that could be in that case, but I have put down number 9, adjectives to it. So I will not support adverbs, but I will put a check on adjectives, although it might go against the book. Okay, so I will say for this one, we're just going to mark it with a question. 我们先来看一下左手边的第4个第3个。好，为什么第4个的答案我会放一个绿色的勾勾和放上一个问号？主要的原因是因为看一下上面我帮大家先条列出的9个常见的定位字，第9个就是形容词比如说我们刚刚说 surprising， 比如说我们刚刚说 modify and improved， 这些都属于形容词。形容词在阅读当中有适度的帮助找出这个句子在文章出处的重要线索，但是副词平常比较少见到它能够作为是一个精准的定位字，所以形容词可以，我打了一个绿勾。副词，我个人并不认为副词可以明确的指出很多题目。我现在讲，如果是要到能够打绿勾勾的 well, usually it was up to like 60% or 70% of a chance to help us find the location of the reading passage text. Okay, but I don't see that much high with the percentage of adverbs. So I'm just going to put a question mark. 可能书本提供的解答在第3个选项的时候是打叉的，也就是他不认为副词和形容词是一个标准的定位字。副词我可能认为对，它比较不常见为是标准的定位字，但是形容词我觉得它已经达到有 60% 的定位作用。比如说我们刚刚看到的，在第1题的 surprising， 在第5题的 modify and improved。Okay, so I'm just going to put a green tick. You could just untick it if you feel like following the answer key. 当然，这个还是我个人的想法，所以如果大家要在这本书所附赠的解答当中，是看第3个，它可能会都是打叉叉的。那没关系，我只是在这里发表一下我比较长时间做题目的感觉。So these were all of my personal opinion. It might be at some point biased, but we're just thinking that way. Okay, next one is the title of a publication. So that certainly is because we were talking about Sydney Daily Times. So I'm just going to put a green tick here. Next, the date of a study or a survey, certainly like the year. The name of a product, Rolls-Royce Merlin engine, number 5, right? A species of an animal. For example, if we were to talk about the Venus trap, a kind of plant that can eat insects. Okay, so yeah, if that were to referring to a species of animals, which is clearly identifiable. Next one, prepositions and conjunctions. Well, certainly it's not going to agree on that because we do see lots of in, at, of, by sort of prepositions appearing here. Okay, so I'm just gonna rule it out. Number 9, specific nationality like Canadian, okay, South Africa, New Zealand. Okay, so that could seen as nationalities or national names to it. Next, historic period like the 19th century. Okay, so we can see a lot of years or months to it. Like we have put it down, dates and years, sometimes months to it. All right. So let's just move on to the next part. Useful strategy for identifying words with a similar meaning. I might need to roll down a little bit. So allow me just to clear the drawings. And I shall put the screenshots if you need the screenshots. If you don't need the screenshots, you could always leave it there. If you need it, I shall place that in the meeting chat and you find it easily. 截图有需要的同学就可以留存，如果不需要的话就不存它就好了。等一下这个 portal 结束它就不见。Right, so let's move on to following part, which we'll see from here. Useful strategy by identifying words with similar meaning. So if we were to say about language use, the statement and the text will be different to decide whether the statement are true, false, or not given. And you will need to recognize synonyms and paraphrase, for example, words or phrases with a similar meaning to it. Now, look at the 6 statements again. Match all of these answers. Starting from number A, B, C, D, E, F. Okay, so we need to use the except from this part and try to work on these parts with it. Okay, so I'll take the first one as an example. So when we get to see about this part and saying, look, if we have A, they say, however, this idea has been rejected by other scientists. So we will have to think about the paraphrase. We will have to think about the synonyms. And let's not be so naive in the first place of entering this IELTS exam territory. There's also a third type of thing we also need to consider is highly relevant, right? So the first part of the words, paraphrase. Number 1, the most commonly seen trap is paraphrase. The second is synonyms. The third is highly relevant. 我还是再稍微唠叨5秒钟就好。在 IELTS 的阅读里面有4种最常见的，没有的话 word fork， 用单字泡泡或者单字3叉戟的方式，将一个字的延伸词或同义替换变成一个有视觉影像记忆点的东西，自己画过一遍。如果容易忘记的话，你就可以把它画1、2次，或者是加上自己喜欢的句子，就比较容易记起来。 Now, get back to the third is highly relevant. But exactly what kind of thing would you consider highly relevant? Okay, so for example, they might be saying phrases like, this castle has been built over 280 years ago. And at the time, there weren't any designs of windows. So the text was saying that must be very drafty there at the time. 比如说文章里面提到280年前的这个城堡没有窗户，所以他们只是在城墙上挖上一个洞，让它呢就是通风。好，那题目里面就说到了当时的这个城堡设计建筑的居住者，可能呢相对来讲会觉得呢是很 drafty 啊，就是很清凉的，或者是这时候你会说这个风啊很新鲜的这个空气的感觉。So that's probably one of those ideas. I see some signs saying there is private message, but in this system, we won't be able to get any private message. We can only get alert. 好，我看到有同学有讲，但是我们这个公版是看不到私讯的，就是我的系统里面，所以可能要在如果有要说什么的同学，可以在 public speech 那边吗？好，然后等一下我有时间的话再看哦，先等我一下下，我把这个地方先讲完。So when we talk about 刚讲到了 drafty 这个词，对不对？好，所以他说当时没有窗户，只是在城墙上挖洞，所以文章里面可能讲到呢，当时的生活形态呢，这个城堡当中的通风度是相对良好的。那这时候我们就可以联想到，哎，它也不是一 paraphrase，它也不是二 synonyms，它归类在三 highly relevant 高度相关语词。So when we focus on highly relevant words, we must pay extra attention. They don't literally explain and say the same thing, but they will try to express it in a different way. Now, if we look down to here, however, this idea has been rejected by other scientists. Now, if we were to attend for this one, where is the, yeah, okay, good. So they were to say about disbelief, not find something not convincing, right? Not trustworthy. So some academics referring to other scientists and then rejected, it literally means it was criticized. They criticize about the credibility as well as the accountability of such a theory. Okay, so that's probably one idea we can assume, but this is a very straightforward answer for number 3. Now, B, redesign in order to make it more fuel efficient. Like we said previously, we were talking about adjectives, right? And if we were to say things like they say, I want to find a paraphrase or a synonym for redesign. So when we refer to the redesign part, it means like it has been modified, it has been improved. And so using adjectives under it, it's extremely prominent. So like the one we have over here using the black color, the automobile was modified and improved. So it means redesign. Although they weren't using the same word, but they express exactly the same meaning. Now, we're going to mark part B over here as 5. Now, C, and this was a finding that was completely unexpected. When things are unexpected, usually means it's very surprising. So same thing as we could regard as number 1 down there. We could mark that as 1 because when you find things that are unexpected, they were unplanned. The same as surprising. And that's why we were saying sometimes adjectives can work as, let's say, a critical part in identifying the clues. So D, E, and F, we were not being able to accomplish all of them, but we'll just see how it works in the answers. We'll provide the answers in the color of blue. So 4, 6, and 2, right? And so when we go through these, you can say they talk about things like identical techniques. And that can link straight back to the idea of the same way, right? And number 6, ordinary people express a broad range of views. We were just putting some focus right down there. A broad range of views could explain they held a wide variety of opinions. Now, and we move to number F, including statements that have since been shown to be inaccurate, meaning they were not the actual truth, and will also be considered. For number 2, it says factual errors. So we'll see how it goes. Right down here, we say inaccurate. That will be regarded as factual errors. Each one of them carries some meanings or so. Now, if we're moving on to page 24, let me see about the range there. Angela says, teacher, I'm new here. Could you talk about word bubble? Word bubbles were like, time do I have? Okay, I'm just going to spend, say, maybe 30 minutes onto it. 30 seconds, 30 minutes will be way over. Right, so word bubble was like if you write down one of those words you collect, and you could also give many ideas out of it. For example, you could connect it to many different words. And you have a bubble to begin with, and then we put down some important words that, like, we can say inconclusive. This is an inconclusive results, or you could say to interpret results. Or you could say to analyze results. And you could also have to demonstrate the results, means to show. Or you could say the results suggests. And sometimes you could also have preliminary results. You will form the word bubbles. And then so you gain a lot of information about how it looks like, or how this one word can be interpreted into any other words. So you could use results in the center. But for the following up arrows, you might also try many different words that can paraphrase results. For example, you could say consequence, outcome, upshot, outturn, sequel, effect, reaction, repercussion, reverberation. These were all the same word, go under the synonym of results. So you can say consequence, outcome, upshot, outturn, sequel, effect, reaction, repercussion, reverberation. Okay, so these were many words to go on with a list. And then so you knew exactly what to paraphrase it immediately. But here I'm only making this because you could use it in many different ways, not just to accumulate your own synonym word bubbles. Now, if we were to say following parts for task information, 刚刚的图表大家可以擅自的把它换成是同义词的 word bubble， 也就是你在中间放一个字 results， 另外延伸出7个或8个不等的同义替换词，来增加自己在阅读当中的即时单字量的同义查找，在大脑里面。Of course, we're not getting any dictionary. So feel free to use these kind of strategy because many scientists found this way very, say, credible for level up students' vocabulary in a given period of 3 months. Okay. Now, we go for task information, table, note, flowchart completion, or diagram labeling. They are all came under the same category, but different formats. Okay, so if we were to go for such a thing, there might be, say, I might need to go to a different file. 好，我们先从这个跳到另外，这里有，好，那我们从这里看好吗？我以为它没办法用 PDF 打开了，前几天的状况是这样。So let's just go over these parts. Now, when we go for question types like notes, table, diagram, and flowchart completion, there are certain strategies similar, or we could call them as identical. 有些技巧非常相似，所以我们来看一下，如果这些题型在试做的时候该怎么样去做会比较方便。好，大概有9章哦，所以等一下大家可能会再借我一下时间。So the first one was referring to note, table, diagram, and flowchart completion. Is designed to test the candidate's ability to understand details and or the main idea of a section of the passage. So we need to get to the details they want. And we also need to be able to scan the text to find the location of the answers. We also need to be aware of type of words that will fit into the given gap. Like I say, most likely 80% of the answers from note, table, diagram, as well as flowchart. Mine came in 3 forms. The first came as nouns. The second came as adjectives. The third came as verbs. So we can assume a likely answer or the type of words we need will go under these 3 categories. Now, these were look like notes completion. So they give us a short passage summary or short passages of notes, and we need to read around and so get back to the real text and find the answers accordingly. So that's the second one, table completion. Table completion came in boxes, and those boxes were like from the left to the right. At this moment, we need to pay extra attention by their title, column, and rows, which we will attend to these type of questions in the following weeks. Now, the third type were diagram completion. They offer us an illustration, very much like a drawing, and we need to distinguish different parts of this drawing by reading. So it's not so easy as we could tell, but let's not mistake it. This is like sometimes they could be in orders, and sometimes diagram completion can be in random orders as well. So extra attention needs to be paid at this moment. And then we go for flowchart completion. Flowchart completion would also be filling gaps in the same formats, but they go from a top-down system. So it's like we have different steps. And when we do the flowchart, make sure we stick to the signposting words. What are the likely signposting words? The first, second, third, after that, finally. Or they can say addition to it, or in additional, or then, or they can start by sharing words that carries meaning that will, let's say, pave the way for the following different stages or following different phases to it. All right, so this is the diagram completion. You could have seen the illustration on the computer screen, right? And then we need to read the text to find out different name of number 6, number 7, and number 8 based on what we've been given in the reading text. But let's say sometimes, you see, we could find question 6 somewhat here. So this is question 6. This is question 7. So 7 came before 6. And then right next to 6, we discovered the answer for question 8. So as I say, sometimes those questions not always in orders. They could be in random orders as well. And in the following weeks, we're going to say these were indefinite question types. Right. Now, if we were to move on to the next steps to follow, if we are doing completing notes, tables, diagram, and flowcharts. Now, have a quick look for these ideas. First is read the instructions and questions. Underline or circle any important words. For example, keywords, like the previous 9 we talk about. And this way, your idea of what you need to complete reading task. By doing so, we will be saving ourselves more time and then finding the answers faster, the right section or area of the passage quicker. As we all underline the locating words or keywords, think of possible synonyms for these keywords. For example, you can say an extra activities you can do in this point is to anticipate likely answer. You can think about maybe this is a noun, plural or singular noun. Maybe this is an adjective, something positive or something derogative. Maybe this is a verb. So first, assume the likely answer. Furthermore, in note and summary completion, accurate grammar is required. So you could look at the grammatical structure of this particular question. And so we gain some basic understanding about, by having this as the basic, the rudimentary structure, what kind of word do I need? Can I anticipate this to be a plural or a singular? By looking at the word in front of the blank, like if they say many something, so we can say that something is a plural. If they say single something, then we can assume it's going to be a singular noun, right? So think about if you need a verb, a noun, a number, maybe an adjective, etc., to complete each gap, right? Scan reading the text quickly. We are not doing a research at this point, so we have to make it haste a bit. Locate the area or locate the sections in the passage where the answers are. Be aware in the passage or areas of these. Keywords we underline in step 1 are likely to express in terms of, again, synonym or words paraphrased. So locating the same keywords in a section like we had just practiced about that, right? So when they say the idea was rejected, we found criticized. We talk about the Rolls-Royce Merlin engine has been improved and modified. So we changed that to the ideas of the car had been redesigned. Okay, so those were how we identify the passages paraphrased quick enough. Now, for completing diagrams and flowcharts, answers can usually be found in 1 or 2 paragraphs or sections. Yet, if we get to completing tables and notes, answers can usually be found in 3 or 4 paragraphs or something longer sections of the text. Now, if we were to get back to the first part here, this is very much like an opening about introducing table, flowcharts, and labeling of the sorts. Now, useful strategy by identifying locating words and phrases. If we were to pay extra attention to this one, we see about this is the note. Okay, and we also need to pay extra attention about one word only, right? So if that's the case, and this is the topic, right? The discovery of Antarctica. And how do we try to remember the word? How can we find the location immediately? Now, this one is easy, I have to say. Don't take these practices on the book over seriously because it might try to adjust for a lower level, so we will find it less challenging and had more confidence in practicing it. So this is not literally going to be the exact practice test when you sit for the mocking test. Okay. They tend to offer a slew of information that is more than enough. Now, when we see this, is the first title, right? 18th century to early 19th century. And then they move on to the late 19th centuries. Now, if we were to think about the rest of the bits, they talk about years and dates, as well as names. So 1973, 73, James Cook, near Antarctica, 1820, Bellingshausen and Lazarev saw the coast of Antarctica, and by the year of 1821, to hunt something on, let's say, hunt something in the ocean, because they say at sea, right? John Davis landed in Antarctica. So they offer us names, locations, titles, right? Number 3, 1829 to 1830. The first, something we don't know, but the first is an adjective, which means it was pioneer at the time. Brought back was, so we can assume this is going to be a singular noun. And more likely, it could be things that are smaller in size. The reason why we can assume it might be in smaller size is because they say brought back from Antarctica. If it were to be an elephant, if it were to be a mammal elephant, there's no way they could brought it back from Antarctica. So when we think about brought something back to Antarctica, more likely to be something tiny, something small, something portable, and it's going to be a singular. All right. Now, what can we anticipate for number 2? For question number 2, get back here, to hunt at sea. So we're thinking about maybe this is a sea life. It might be a life form, a marine life form. Okay, so we can assume a marine life form. For example, what we can actually hunt are animals, right? So we can say maybe they were seagulls, they were sea turtles, lions, manatees, dolphins, seals. Those were some likely options for marine life form to be hunted at sea. Okay, so we can assume this is the name of a species. Now, if we were get to number 1, what can you anticipate for question 1? Because they say, James Cook saw several rocky blah, blah, blah from his ship near Antarctica. So he was on his ship and then he saw something rocky. Rocky certainly requires soil, requires a huge amount of earth so that we could be able to see some rocky, for example, territory, geographical feature. Okay, so we can assume this might be a noun and it's related to geographical feature. For example, Rocky Mountain, if we were to be, haunted by the American geography. Okay, Rocky Mountain, maybe. But these were the first preliminary anticipation. And then we need to go further for number 4, number 5, and number 6 onward. Do exactly the same thing. Right. Now, if we were to go to the part what I'm doing now is try to narrow it down to a range so we could spend less time doing it. use these words here. Now, the first one we were anticipating for a singular geographical feature. As we could find that, oh, we don't know if because they say several, so plural geographic feature. Fossil, walking, winter, dogs. Dogs are plurals, but they are not geographical features. Islands is more reasonable down to this point. So we can put it down as islands. What about number two? Number two, we were talking about sea turtle, manatees, sea lions, dolphins, whales, sharks, and so on, because they were talking about animal species to be hunted at their expedition. So what else? Storm certainly is not a kind of species, but seals are. So we put it down as the ideas. First, to form your first anticipation, your assumption is very important if we are going to the right direction to it. What about number three? We've already taken away islands and seals. What about question three? Can you type your answers in the meeting chat and have a guess about number three? And then more of those people try the blue parts for question 4, 5, as well as 6. 如果能够试试看的同学，请帮我尝试第三题，就是我们刚刚在解完了以后，觉得第三题应该是什么？我们刚刚说它要能够 brought back from Antarctica， 从极圈能够带回来的东西应该是小的，不可能带一只猛犸象的这个冰冻尸体，对不对？所以它应该是一个小东西。好，那做完第三题或猜完第三题，或者是呢假设正确的同学。好，请进入4、5、6。为什么说假设正确呢？因为我们有2个同学、3个同学。好 ，fossil, yes, that's right. Something small and tiny and will be able to carry back to their homeland to endure the entire long journey. 这么长的海上旅程能够带回家的东西，势必是小，而且要有纪念价值，能够存久、耐放，不能坏掉。自然狗狗不会是其中一个选项。Fossil is the right answer. Thank you. Now, if we're moving on to 4, 5, and 6, what is your anticipation? 我们来猜猜看，4、5和6可能又会是什么比较能够预测的答案？ Question 4. International Geographical Congress encourage exploration and something. Now we're looking into a pair. By observing and, we can assume and usually comes in pair, which means their form of words are identical. So exploration is a noun. And so we are looking for number 4 as the answer, a noun as well. So we can assume it's going to be a noun, and then it carries the same feature as exploration. Very often when we're talking about those International Geographical Congress, they all encourage, yeah, Andy is getting the correct answer, bravo, because if we were to pair, if we're looking into a pair, exploration and science seems all very reasonable. A and B. Right, and then so B is going to account it for science. That's the important part of looking into a pair. They provide a good wealth of information. How about 5 and 6? Any more guesses? The name was like science, winter, and dogs. And then Archibald was like science, winter, and dogs. Archibald, you know what? You have exactly the same name as Agatha Christie's husband. Agatha Christie's husband, her first husband. His name was Archibald. Okay, so anyway, that's a good guess. So when we look at Belgian expedition stayed in Antarctica over a period of time, usually we can identify it by looking at the word over. It provides us a duration of time span. So it would be very likely to say, we don't have years to say over many months, over 2 years, but we have over winter. So that's more, say, winter. Because over usually indicates a specific period of time. About duration. Often talk about duration as well as time span. Now, what can we do for 6? Were. So were goes with the plural forms. We've taken winter. And then they say used for transport, which means those things were plural. And then it needs to carry those researchers or carry sailors when they get on foot. They get on the land, they need to navigate around. They can't just walk around. Right? They couldn't just walk around. It was being too grand. So they need dogs to help them. So that's the moment we identified that were was using indicator as to plural forms about S. So, well, so that's just going to be in that way. And we'll still say dogs. Bravo. Excellent. So thanks for the 3 volunteers. Andy, Archibald, Luna, Renee. Do I need to take a screenshot? Or you could take, I think you could do it with the Student Ants portal, right? Now, moving on to the next. Why do people collect things? As a matter of fact, this kind of strategy can be used directly to the point of doing the Gwendolyn and Margaret Davis. Exactly the same strategy. Anticipate the answer. Plural form, singular form, adjectives, or a noun. Now, if we were moving on to the part why people collect things, I've marked out those researchers' names so that we can gain some time for the further pages, because we need to match up to page 42. I'm not sure if we are able to do so, but I'll see what I can do. Now it's 3:08. So why do we need to collect these things? True, false, and not given. When we do the true, false, not given, it's like there are certain strategy, especially distinguishing between false and not given, can sometimes present as a stumbling blocks for many test takers. And we shall not worry about that, because that will be sorted out in the following weeks about these parts. And this is the first session, so we will regard that as a tutorial. Speak about general angle and talk about the general topic or task, but we'll go for the details in the following weeks. Now, if we were to move on to the tips, look at it quickly. The title and decide who or what the text is all about. Skim, read the text very quickly, get to an idea of the content and structure. Don't worry about words you don't understand. It's been long gone. We've been worrying about the last time. Look at the questions and underline the locating words. Find the part of the text that's relevant to the first question. Read it in detail and decide if the answer is true, false, or not given. Remember, look out for synonyms and paraphrase. Right, so this is rather important. Be very watchful for synonyms and paraphrases. And again, highly relevant. Account is for number 3, remember? Now do the same for the other questions. So we'll start by looking into it, the following parts. The first we've marked it out was Dr. Okay, maybe I should make it like clearer to see. I need to have a clear view. Now, by looking at question number 1 to number 6, there are names, titles, and most of them were like, for example, places, locations. Question number 1, Dr. Maria Richter. Richter was referring to names. So it would be very easy to spot straight back up here. So Dr. Maria Richter. And then whatever the answer would be about is around this range. Okay, so find the answers for question 1 up here. Question number 2, nonetheless, we've just erased some bits about it. So we're just going to put it back. They say, question 2, a form of collecting may have helped some ancient humans to survive. Okay, so some ideas, for example, collecting helped ancient humans survive. So we need to find the reference about collecting things can help human beings, let's say, to live or to sustain longer in the world is to survive. So they will be able to uphold the entire tortures in the environmental issues they have, hunting for food, finding a place as a shelter to live. Okay, so what is collecting things make it so different for humans' survival? Here, for question number 2, the blue part, we were saying here, usually write down to the next question because true, false, not given questions are from a top-down system. Okay, so only by collecting sufficient food supplements to last through freezing winters or dry summers could our ancestors, which means human beings, and then they say survive means they will be able to stay alive. So here, stay alive, meaning to survive. Stay alive and collect things. Of course, food supplies would also regard as one kind of things. So the answer for these 2, we also need to go to the pink part to go over what Maria Richter was saying. Psychologist Dr. Maria Richter argues that the urge to collect is a basic human characteristics, according to her. In the very first year of life, we form emotional connections with lifeless objects, such as soft toys. So, what kind of lifeless objects did you form connection with, or did you have a bond with? 这里提到，人们在幼年时期呢，通常都会对于没有生命而柔软的小布偶产生了强烈的情绪依赖。所以他说，人们在收集的这个行为上来观察，是可以开始在非常非常小的年纪就有这样的行为。不知道大家 ，Do you collect any lifeless objects？ 都收集什么样的 soft toys？I remember mine was a blanket, and it was so torn and rotten and worn out that every single time my parents they wanted to wash it, and then I remember I would beg them not to, because once the tiny rod been washed, the texture and the smell and everything is different. And I think that's something I need to keep it that way. So perhaps, yeah, it did start when we were very little. 对，我记得我的是一条小被子，然后不可以洗，不用帮我拿去洗哦。然后呢，帮我偷偷拿去洗的话，我又要再重新制造一次，就是我会把痱子粉洗好的 然后没有味道了，就是要撒满痱子粉跟万金油，就是搓在手上，然后把棉被拿来扭一扭，让它确保每一个角都有那个味道。I was like pretty cranky at the time. 大家不知道有没有用过类似的 So I suppose, yeah, those lifeless objects, it does carry a lot of our childhood memories, right? Don't you think so? Or you might be thinking this is a cranky behavior and I would never have that, or I would never do that. Now, if we're moving on to the following question 3, remember, true, false, not given, they were from a top-down system. So as I have addressed to it several weeks later, we've gone through 12 weeks, right? These were in orders. So top-down system. We've spotted the answers from para 1. Maybe, I'm sorry, I'm supposed to use para 1, right? And that was in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. 9 to 10. And then we are looking for question 2. Form of collecting. Help us survive. So that was in 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 to 18. You can tell that they are from a top-down system. This is line 9 to 10. This is 16 to 18. Same paragraph, but in a sequential way. As I say, head to toe, and you'll find the answer. So look no further. Question 3, Leonard Woolley. So I expected this might be a professor or a researcher's name. But then in following says, find the remains of a private collection at Ur. Okay, so we are going to go back to the idea about names and location, right? So these are names. These are locations. So because they say at, so we can assume this is a place. Go back directly to see where it was. And of course, in the same time, try finding number 4. Woolley found writing that identifies some of the objects he discovered. So he says, found writing that those writing or the writing can identify some of the objects he discovered. So found writing, identify objects he discovered. The reason why I'm trying to propose for doing the two together is because it's very likely while we are reading through it, we might accidentally discover the answer for the next. So to save us some time, we are going to propose for doing two together. When you do true, false, not given, please do so. If you could extend your short-term memory, you could as well do 3 together. So number 3, Leonard Woolley. Number 4, Woolley's writing identify objects he discovered. Okay. So number 3 is about Leonard Woolley and at Ur. Go on to the top range where we left not so long ago. This is the first place where we spotted the name of researcher. I'm not sure if it is a doctor or a professor, but then I'm just going to say this is Woolley, this is Ur. City of Ur. Right. And then so Willie had traveled to the region intended only to excavate the site of a palace. Intended only to excavate. But question number 3 say expected to find, which is just the opposite. So we can say, if we try to look in this way, Leonard Woolley, right? Expected to find. Okay, 5 more minutes. The remains. Okay, let's do it this way. All right. And then so we could spot his name. We could spot the location, city of Ruhr, and then find the remains to the regions. I need to change the color to red. They say intending only to excavate the site of palace. But here, question says expected to find the remains. The first intention was very different. First, he was only intended to excavate the site, to dig out. But question 3 says expected to find remains, which is just quite different from it. So we could mark the answer. Question 3, false. It's not stating the reality. We don't see any information about the discussion to expect finding the remains. We only discover about the ideas of intending only to excavate the site. He was not holding any hopes to find remains or any relics to this point. So question 3 would be regarded as false. Although we have his name, we have Ruhr, but it was nothing relevant to this part. Now, question 4, Woolley found writing that identifies some of the objects he discovered. So we need to read further about the information. He dug an artifact with being alone at a 2,500-year-old museum. Among the objects that were part of a statue and a piece of a local building, and accompanying some other artifacts were descriptions like modern-day labels. So these were pretty much like writing, right? Were descriptions like modern-day labels, and these texts, now continue with it, something important. These texts appear in 3 languages and were carved into pieces of clay. It seems like this early private collection of objects was created by Princess Inigaldi, the daughter of King Nobinus, right? So for question number 4, found those writing. The writing means text for question 4. Right, and then they say, identify the objects he discovered. Seems to be like these early private collection of objects was created by Princess Inigaldi. So we could say the writing did actually identify some of the objects, right? Was, so it seems like this early private collection, 3 languages carved into pieces of clay. And those were then seen as early private collection created by Princess Inigaldi. So identify those objects in the following reference explanations here. Carving. I was using a different, okay, carved into the clay. And those clays can identify early private collection of objects created by, which means identified it, whoever owned it. Okay, so those objects were appear in the first place. Objects, right down to this point. So question number 4, the answer should be going with true. Right, we don't have enough time for the following of 5 and 6. But we could have a quick look about number 5 because that was not given and it was explained here in the following. However, very little else is known about Princess Inigaldi or what her motivations were for setting up her collection. So we don't have any reference about her intention. So question 5. Princess Inigaldi established her collection to show off her wealth. We don't really know if that was her first intention. So question 5 can only be marked as not given to this range. Number 6, displaying artwork was the main purpose of cabinets of curiosity. That was in the next paragraph where you can find it. And so question 6, we're not having enough time to discuss, but we'll relate that as false. And you might find it in the later part of paragraph 3. All right, so it's about time, 3:26. We're supposed to call it a day. But well, so I will withdraw from the desktop sharing mode today. In the following weeks, we will further discuss about more details and strategy and how to combat the nodes, flow charts and tables and maps and so on. Right, so thanks for coming today, and I shall be seeing you on next Thursday. All right, and make sure that you have some excerpt of the Cambridge IELTS 21 if you need some practice about it. Okay, take care. Ciao. Bye-bye.